Good. All right. Very briefly, the organization I work with is about 30,000 employees across the country, and I work across the country with the organization on organization development and change and employee surveys and 360s and environmental scanning and all kinds of stuff. And we had the opportunity to talk to a lot of experts. My PhD is in organization development, so I kind of dug into that a little bit. And we said, well, there are many models. And so we took a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and we really buttressed it with a lot of research. So we came up, and then we always say, if you're going to have a good model, if you're going to invent something, get an acronym first and then go backwards. Do the brand before the beef. No, I got that backwards, I think. But anyway, so the brand we came up, or the name that we tried to get people to remember, was the LEAD process. And it actually does stand for something, to listen to employees, to listen to them, to get them engaged in a process is the E part, but to listen to them through a couple of models. You can do an employee survey. You can ask them what they think through an anonymous employee survey we developed. We could do what I'm going to share with you, a thing called a LEADicator, which is really a very simple instrument to get people involved in talking about where the root issues are. And to engage them in a workshop just like this. And we've done well over 120. I have a colleague in Atlantic who worked with me on this process, and he's done at least 50 just this year going into workplaces. The alignment part is really important because when you do a workshop and you find some gaps that you think you can close with some local activities and action plans, you've got to align it to what your key purpose is as an organization. And so in that process of alignment, we said, this is great, we're going to come up with ideas, but how do they fit into the key purpose of your organization? The mission and vision and goals are all nice, but ultimately, what are you doing, right? So it's got to fit. The D part was by far the hardest, and that's do something with these great ideas you've just come up with in a workplace. And traditionally, you'd have these action plans with 3 to 6 things you want to do. We said, well, that's kind of dumb because none of them will get done because, well, you've got 3 to 6, and you're too busy doing everything else. So we came up with this idea. We said, I'll tell you what, pick one. And you're going to see in this process, we said, if you could come up with one idea that you could do in 30 to 60 days, that'll be great. Within your control, that you could work on together. Yeah, sure, we could do that. You can, eh? Well, then go do it. Oh, we could do 6. No, don't do 6. Do 1. Oh, okay. And then they discovered, not so easy. We got to meet. We got to talk about it. We're going to have arguments about it. Gee, it's getting a bit more complicated than we thought. And it was great because they did it. It was one thing. And they did it within 30 to 60 days. And what they learned, when you give somebody one thing to do, they learn 2 things when they succeed, and they will succeed. They learn, success is possible. Change does happen, despite all the literature against it. So change can happen. But the second thing was the most important. They learned how to create change. They learned how to work together. They learned how to achieve success. And that was huge because that's embedded. You can change your workplace to have better communications, more meetings, whatever it might be, and that's nice. Now you've got this action that helps, but the process is embedded in how you do things every day now. So now they've did one thing, they've learned to work together, what works well. Now they go to the next one, and the third, and the fourth, and it's really quite rich. When you look at your organization, certainly ours, I'm sure every organization does environmental scanning. In other words, what's happening out there that's affecting us internally? And these are very common external factors. What's the economy like? How is it affecting our company? What's happening with technology? How does it affect our company? And around you go, right? Society and culture, what kind of values and attitudes does the public have today about the business you're in? Demographics is huge, and it has a huge impact on the workplace, as you know, not just the aging baby boomers like me falling off a cliff, but younger employees coming into the workplace, maybe a different sense of expectations. Some might say entitlement, I don't say that, but anyway. But a sort of a different and I think rightful look at a workplace and the kind of things that should be there today. So those things all are having an impact. And you're going to see inside this little model about culture and systems and stuff. We looked a lot at our organization, and we said, you know what, it's a holistic model. You can't just look at one piece without thinking about the other pieces like a human body. And so when we look at it, we kind of looked at this culture climate change cycle, we called it. And here's the deal. You know about culture, you know about the deep-rooted stuff, all the things you've read about what is culture, right? Well, we came up with a really simple definition of culture. It's what you can get away with in this place. I would argue, and I've written and researched this thing, and I think some people agree as well, that the culture of an organization today, the values, the traditions, how you define things like responsibility and accountability and stuff, that is changing way faster than the structure. The structure there is like who reports to who. Is it hierarchical? Is it flat? Is it multiple layers? Is it a matrix model? Whatever, right? I want to make a real quick point here. The reason we see a lot of conflict, at least in our organization, and I'm seeing everywhere in other organizations, culture is moving faster than the structure. Employees are coming into the workplace, customers, clients, the public. The whole thing of Occupy, fill in the blank, is because the responsibilities aren't quite there anymore in the structure that they want, and that whole thing is starting to shift. So those systems you see, whatever they might be in your organization, affect the workplace climate, and that's the difference between the culture and climate, and they get mixed up sometimes. Culture is deep-rooted history. What are things like? What are people getting away with? How is it shifting? Climate, here and now. Job satisfaction, morale. Impacted by those other things, though. And if employees are unhappy, their actions aren't exactly going to be great. It's not what your customer expected. It's not a very effective way of doing business, and it won't be supported either internally by people or certainly outside by the public or others. So you're going to see we came up with identification of 6 key areas of systems that we say if we can talk about that, what's behind those things, the definition of them, and are there gaps, we could start identifying where is there a problem in this whole holistic kind of integrated model. So this thing here is called the LEADicator. Very simple and yet pretty deep. So every time we do these things, we use an employee survey. It's anonymous. We ask a whole bunch of questions, and we've discovered over several thousand employees that there are 6 common areas of structure in an organization or 6 common systems in an organization coming out of the structure. Doesn't matter what organization you have, doesn't matter what workplace, these 6 common overarching themes are part of any organizational process and system. And then you ask the big question, well, really, how important is it on a scale of 1 to 5? Well, 4, 3, 2, whatever. Good. How good a job are we doing on each one of these things that you've identified, ranging in importance? Why do we do both? Because you see in many job satisfaction surveys, and you might have even done them yourself or been part of them, they only ask how good a job are you doing. Well, what if you're doing a great job on something nobody cares about? How do you know? I really strongly believe you've got to do both, all right? So that way, if you ask both sets of questions, how important is this to you? How good a job are we doing? You find gaps. You'll never find 5 out of 5's importance and performance. Never. 3 things come up consistently in our employee surveys, as well as these quick hit LEADicators. Poor accountability, poor internal communications, and poor conflict resolution. Over and over and over again, they top the list of big gaps between what's important and what's being done. And they are very interconnected, and they are very connected to job satisfaction and morale. So when you look at this then leads you to a conversation. You sit around with your own folks, or if you're consulting, you say, you know what, we kind of did a quick gauge of the temperature of this organization. There are gaps. And, unless I'm going blind, this red circle doesn't seem to fit the blue circle. So what should we do? And that's where you get into the conversation. What's causing the gap? How does one thing fit into the other? So you show them this thing, and they look at it visually. If they like charts and graphs, and they could show them this one. Say, well, okay. I don't like this approach too much, or this way of presenting the data. I like this one because it shows it's integrated and it's holistic. These things are intertwined, very much so, very important.